Welcome back to another ground up SCX24 build, and today we're going to be doing a hard park build, and it is no mystery this time. As you can see, I've got a Dementor DUV chassis sitting here on the table ready to go. We've got a lot of other goodies here. I've got a hard park transmission, we've got some Dementor blade links, got some pre-assembled billet Super 8s from Little Guy, as well as a Shift RC Nano M servo. We've got some FURITEK goodness, Mofo goodness, and to round it out, we've got some hard park shocks here. So the first time I've used this shock set, heard a lot of good things about it, and we've got maybe one more thing that's coming as a surprise. And as always, wheels and tires, they're not locked in yet, so we will see what works with the build. I do have some ideas, but I think for now, let's jump in and get this guy going. Figured we'd start with a quick run through of the chassis kit components. So you get your front tray, your flat skid, and your rear tray, as well as your nice DUV elongated roof. So that is really the only difference in the setup on this. So all the shock setup, link setup is exactly the same as far as the frame. So if you hold these up and overlay them, it's only the roof that is really different. And this rear tray, I can't remember if I just left out the rear tray or it didn't come with one on that V-dub, but that possibly is unique. This front tray looks just the same. The skid is just the same. So pretty basic little kit there. But they do give you hardware, which is nice. So you're basically ready to rock, provided you come up with all the rest of the components. So speaking of that, let's take a look at those. So I've got the Hard Park DW1.5 transmission here. So this is their ground up design. This is the revised newest version with the spur gear cover. So just super nice, super smooth. And the key feature here is it puts the motor super low. So typically on these forward-facing brushless mounts, they're going to be floating up here somewhere. So this moves it all the way down, basically into that low stock position there. And this comes with its own skid, and you can see it leans on the skid, or it allows for the skid to lean. But it bolts in through the top there, so there is no hardware underneath, so that is really nice and smooth. Otherwise, the same basic shape as this one. It's a little thicker, and that may be to account for just some stiffness in this mount, maybe to the transmission, but other than that, it's the same. You can't flip this on the transmission at all. It is set. But other than that, just super nice little compact setup. It's oiled, it's tested, it is ready to go. They say that this has a 22% less gearing, or I guess 22% slower than stock with an 11 tooth pinion. With a 16 tooth pinion, they say it's 14% faster. So both of these are 11T pinions here. So this is set up for either a micro little brushless or like a little 050 can. So mounting this in here, it's going to sit in and tuck in. You can see there's a cutout here. Tucks in nice and low there. The only issue I may have mounting it is they've tested it, I think, from a 14 to a 16 pinion, so this is actually an 11. So we'll have to see if I can actually get the hardware in there, get it to mesh, but it looks like it may work. If not, you can see I've got this brand new Mofo Torque Beast X. So this is the fallback option. This is also an 11T pinion, but I think this will fit in nicely. It's a lot smaller as far as its overall kind of out to out, but that's the transmission right there. So nice little unique design from Hard Park. Only place you can get it, I believe it's around $70, but comes with the hardware, and like I say, it's assembled, ready to go. Next up from Hard Park, we have their Dementor titanium V2 blade links. So these are the same ones I used on my prior Dementor build, and they have the nice smooth transition there on the lowers. Got a crazy excessive high clearance bend on this lower rear. The uppers have a little bend and the short side goes to the diff. The front uppers have a little bend as well. The short side goes to the transmission. That is to clear these front lower high clearance links. But super nice. They come with Trial fall hardware, very smooth, very lightweight, and they do come just like this, cut out, pre-finished, ready to go, nice and smooth. The Acres that I bought that were similar to this in blade links, those came attached to each other and you had to cut them apart and then grind down the little nubs. So these are super nice. They are ready to go. So these are the links we'll be using. Let's take a look at those shocks. All right, so I've been itching to try these shocks for a while now. I've heard a lot of good things about them. Apparently they're very smooth and they have one pretty unique feature to them, and that is these black collars as you see there. So typically shocks have this upper barrel threaded and this lower ring for the spring retainer can thread up or down, and so you can preload your spring. So these are fixed, you can't do that. But you can see here I've got one of these barrels installed, so that slips freely around that inner barrel. So that basically allows your tires to hit your shock and not unthread them, not rotate your spring or dig into it or anything. They just keep turning and allow your tire to turn. So a really cool design, super innovative there. The shocks, as far as the package, you purchase the shocks, then you go and purchase springs, and then you can purchase hardware and spacers as well if you like. These are the old spacers now. I think they're just aluminum. These are the plastic ones. I bought these quite a while back and they've been waiting on this build. But now I think it's all aluminum as far as their parts. I think they've gotten rid of the plastic spacers and plastic crossbars, but just really nice, high quality builder type items from Hard Park. As far as the springs, you get two shorties, you get a little stiffer and a super soft, and then the same with the longer ones. So you can set it up a little different as far as your damping. These do not have O-rings, so they won't hold oil, but they do say that they will hold some thick diff fluid. You know, you could always put a little thick grease in there as well to slow them down. But that's the shocks. Let's talk axles. So normally this would be the part where we go over all the parts and pieces and then I assemble them. But little guy has done the work for me. So these are fully assembled, brand new billet housings. These are super nice. The gray links, the gray knuckles, I think only come with this fully assembled kit. I don't think you can buy these billet pieces separately. So nice, fairly lightweight assembly here. They do have a little weight because they are aluminum, and I'll put that on the screen. But overall, really nice setup, and they do come with overdrive pre-installed, except per the website, I believe there was a mix-up maybe in the first batch or two, so I'm going to check. I think they said the overdrive may be in the rear diff, so that'll be the first thing, is to check those gears, make sure they're in the right spot. And then I think I'm going to add one brass diff cover to the front to add a little bit of weight, but since this thing comes with the knuckles and everything, I'm going to go ahead and keep them, not replace them with brass. Since it is a carbon fiber chassis, we don't need tons and tons and tons of weight, and I think I've got another way to get a little low weight. But as far as the rest of the components, not much here. We've got an aluminum servo mount tray from Mofo. I've got this red adjustable ramp crab rear link riser, so a nice splash of color to go with those red shocks. And then I've got the kind of centerpiece here for this one, the Nano M. Since that'll be front and center on the build, I wanted to get a nice looking servo. So where are the specs here? Here we go. So 8.4 is the max, and 151 ounce inches at that setting, so super powerful. So I will be running this up at 8.4 with that Lizard Ultimate BEC, and then of course I've picked up the sweet little matching shift servo horn to go with that. So that's the axle component. So I'm going to do a little bit of minor reassembly on those diffs, check that gearing, get on the diff cover and a few of these pieces, and then we'll start assembling a slider. Back to a little axle progress here. So I've got the last few bits that I needed bolted on and installed. That link riser looks really nice. So it is adjustable, so we can come back and move that around once we get to links. I pulled the diff cover, found that they did have a 16T in the rear, so that is correct. Put a little udder butter in there, and then just added some pins and aluminum hexes to the ends. So we've got a complete assembly ready to go. And then on the front, nice surprise in the diff here, it was overdrive, and it's actually 212, so that's 33%. So that's a nice surprise. So greased up as well, swapped in the brass diff, added some pins and brass hexes here, and you can see I sanded off most of the back spacing on that hex. That way you can fully engage the pin, press the, tighten the wheel fully to that hex, and it does not bind or crush into that bearing. So again, typical on the Super 8 fronts, that pin sits really close on these CVDs. And then the last note, which is another common item I've found on Super 8s, is having to shim the servo tray to take out a little bit of rock back and forth. So I did that with my typical 2 pieces of double-sided tape. But again, an easy fix right there. So this guy is nice and smooth, ready to go. So I'm going to get both of these assemblies on the scale and see where we ended up. Moving right along, I'm working on my sub-assemblies, and I got to my motor transmission, and after a little struggle, I think I've got this 11-tooth pinion on the Nano Bam meshed up here. So I got a little wiggle there, nice smooth action. And one thing to note, you're going to need your own hardware to mount the motor of your choice. Most of the time the mounts provide that, they correspond to the motor. But since they don't know what motor you're going to be using, they don't give you any. So you do get some hardware to mount the skid and to mount the links, but just something to know there. The note on the motor would be these cables. You can see how tight this is on that inside edge, so you've got to go all the way in basically to get this little pinion to mesh up. So these cables were really bulging forward, so I bent them very carefully by hand, but that wasn't enough. So I basically had to install the motor in the lowest position here and just tighten it down all the way and let the plate basically bend these wires back. Then I could loosen the motor, slide it in and mesh it and snug it back up. But you've got to make sure the motor is flush to that plate so that pinion and spur is parallel, and it gives you a nice mesh there. But it looks like this is going to work out fine. We're going to test it and make sure I didn't damage these cables as I was bending them. So I went ahead and got the little micro receiver soldered up, ready to go. So I'm going to grab the battery and ESC, and we'll spin this guy up. Okay, got a 3S battery plugged up, so we are ready to spin this Nano Bam up. Seems nice and smooth. Let's see reverse. Seems fine. There's a little noise, but I think that's just the typical Metal Gear bearing transmission noise. But as far as that pinion spur, it seems nice and smooth. I think I'm happy with that. So I think we are ready to get this guy installed. Wanted to do a quick sound reference here versus the pad to the table versus me holding it. So here's the table. pick it up. All right, so just so you can get a sense of how that really sounds. All right, links are in, transmission is mounted, and I had to go ahead and mount this front tray to check the clearance, and look at that. Could not get any closer without touching. That is just perfect. So you'll notice that skid is angled upwards in the rear, but the design of the transmission, of course, keeps it vertical, which keeps that motor horizontal, and that just makes everything work out so well. A lot of times when you've got these angled skids and a stock transmission, forward-facing motor, that's going to angle down, potentially conflicting with your upper link mount risers. You can see we've got plenty of space in there. So this will be perfect. It's going to allow me to run the battery up front for that weight. So just working out super well with that DW1.5 transmission. Another nice note on this skid, you can see it's angled outward for these links, so it takes preload out of that joint, sets these up for wide axles, which is great for these Super 8s. You do have to mount these before you install the skid because you cannot access the hardware, obviously. And then the other note, I flipped one of the balls on all of these uppers opposite the other as far as the larger flange, just because, you know, one side mounts inside the frame with the nut, and then for me both of these are single capture points at the servo and at the rear link riser, and they are on the opposite side, so I wanted that wide flange out to make sure the O-ring does not pop off. So a little note there, but otherwise I'd say that's good progress. Back with more progress, so we've got an assembled slider here. This thing is looking really good. So a few little differences here between this and my other VW Dementor build, and that's mainly the front end. So let me get this to full compression here. So you'll see the caster of that front axle, that servo is really leaned back, which by the way is great. So let's compare that to this Dementor VW. So this is already sitting at full squat because it's got the limiting rubber bands. So you can see the angle of that servo is basically flat. It may have a little tilt to the rear, but not much. So I was expecting that to be exactly the same since I've got these Dementor Hard Park blade links for both of them. So I got to looking at these, and it turns out the bottom fronts on these links are about 10 millimeters longer. So these must be a V2 set of links. So what that does is it kicks this axle out further while keeping this point basically the same, so that leans everything and gives you that caster. So that must be a little tweak that they made, and let's take a look at that. That all just works out so well. So the servo and the cord is just missing the tray, and I've got the suspension set up where the tray is sitting on the upper links, and you can see these shocks basically, let me get them bottomed out here. So the shocks are bottomed out, the tray is at the link, and the servo is just missing the tray. So all of the key clearances check out right there. So that looks really good. Side to side is no problem. I've just got the cord squished in as much as I can, and I've still got the rubber band kind of holding it in place. But the front end seemed to work out you know, even better than that VW with this extension here on these lowers. So that's a nice tweak there. The rear end seemed to be basically the same at full squat. Looks like I'm getting just as low as I am on that VW. The only difference is I have a little more space between uppers and lowers because I've got this raised up maybe 2 positions there. But again here, I'm bottoming out the shocks at the rear, and the tray is sitting on those uppers. So perfect there, as low as you can go. So that looks like I'm going to be able to run both trays. There's no interference anywhere, and everything is moving quite nicely. but because of that length difference, had to use a different length drive shaft here in the front. So that is a C10 with about maybe 2 millimeters cut off, and I just use this little pipe cutter tool there to trim it. And then the rear is a different length as well. This is an uncut deadbolt, so no modification there, and that worked just fine. Of course, that is with this transmission setup, so keep that in mind. But so far, I think I'm happy with this initial slider setup. So there's not much left really. It's just to get a little internal weight in there via some electronics, and then we're going to get something on here to make this thing roll. So that's one thing that's coming up, but I think we've got the slider and chassis checked off. Before we move on, I've got one little note here on the shocks. So you can see I've got 4 O-rings here on the table. So I removed one from the outer kind of large flange on all positions there. And that was basically because they were keeping this too tight. It was similar to kind of like a telescoping shock. They would want to flex here at full extension and kind of bend. And so you can see, like if I pull them there, so with both of these tight, it would want to bend right there and cause a little binding. So when you were transitioning like that side to side, it would hang up. So treating them basically like a double barrel shock and removing that loosened up that connection, so they're nice and smooth there. And other than that, no issues with these guys. Ended up using the super soft, which are the shorty little thin springs all the way around. And I'm hoping with the battery in there, the electronics, this thing will go ahead and settle down to basically full droop here, kind of like the VW does, just sit all the way down. But man, I'm loving this caster right here. That's such a good setup now. Just everything from the motor to the servo is just as tight as you can get to that tray. So just a great setup so far. So anyways, just a little note there on the shocks. So moving on. Before I get the electronics buttoned up and in their final home here, I figured it'd be a good time to give the driveline a quick spin up here. One final test, so I've got everything plugged up and hanging out of the vehicle. So let's give this guy a little spin. So nice and smooth. Check reverse. And virtually no torque twist. A little rock, but not much. And there's a drag brake. So everything looks like it's working well. Don't have the servo plugged up yet, and that's for good reason. We'll swing back around to that. But for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and get these electronics tucked in. Let's take a quick look at the final electronics install before we move on. So look at that, nice and clean through that cab. So that was one of my goals, is to be able to see that spur gear and motor spinning and also give them plenty of clearance to do so. But I think that worked out really cleanly right there. This rear tray was perfect to fit both of these little components on some double side. And then you can see I just friction fit the motor wire between the two roof cross panels. just kind of pressed it flat and it holds in there with tension. And you can see I've got my battery extension just queued up and waiting to get plugged in. And then the other nice little thing was you can see there across the way on the frame, the servo cable is double-sided there. So that allows it to snake all the way to the back, basically unseen here. So also super clean. And then the battery, of course, is going to ride in the Velcro up front, and that seems to tuck in pretty well and look pretty good. So I think that's going to do it for electronics. So I think we are ready to move forward and finish this guy up. Before we roll into wheels and tires, I think we're going to take a quick little break for a mail call. So in the intro, I mentioned a little surprise that has arrived in the form of a 3Flow 9 RC box. So we're going to get this guy open, see what we've got here. So this is my first purchase from 3Flow 9. May the flow be with you. So they've got this padding on the inside of the box. That's kind of nice. So what do we have here? So we've got a little scale propane tank. That is pretty sick right there. And what's even crazier, I didn't even order that. So they just tossed in a little freebie. So that is super cool. I don't know that that fits the Dementor build, but we'll save that. This is what I picked up for the build. So I lied. I said I wasn't going to swap anything out on those front axles, but I had to add a little bit of red to the front since I have a little bit of red on the rear. So these are the roller bearing steering links. So they've got all these bearings across there, and then the ends are threaded on so you can have some adjustment there on your toe in, toe out, and your drag link to center that servo. But you can get these in an M2 hardware for the 3Flow 9. I think they have knuckles maybe that are larger, and definitely Hard Park has the low blows that take the larger hardware. So these are actually all 1.4 millimeter, so they're the standard hardware to fit with stock knuckles and just a stock horn here. So I'm going to set these up, and we'll give this guy kind of a final weigh-in here and see kind of where the chassis sits without wheels and tires. Maybe see what kind of wheels and tires we're going to put on this guy. But anyways, I thought this was a cool little addition, and I'm excited to try out something from 3Flow 9. So anyways, we'll get this guy installed and we'll see what it's all about. Okay, just wanted to show actually how smooth these bearings are. So it just, I mean, it feels like I'm unthreading it or something. There's no resistance, it's just like butter. And that's anywhere I basically hold this. So hopefully that'll translate into some really good performance there when you come up on any kind of obstacle. But just a really cool design, and definitely adds a little bit of weight, especially compared to the aluminum link that's on there. So that'll be nice as well. But really, really cool design here from 3Flow 9. So I'm interested to try some more of their products. That's interesting. That cut there, that must be for clearance down here potentially to the, that's all I can think. That's gotta be just shaved down. I didn't even notice that, but looks like they thought of every little detail here on this guy. And they give you 2 O-rings, and that is to place right here between the drag link and the knuckle. So they say those may or may not be needed to take out any slop. But anyways, I'll get this installed. Note as I'm getting this stuff reinstalled, so I was getting this servo horn in its final position there, and although it looks like that's a hex hardware on that head, it really will not let a 1.5 seat fully into it, so it's really hard to torque that down and get your servo horn attached to your servo. Even with a nice 1.5, it just doesn't want to do it without feeling like it's going to strip. So I found that a little star, this is a T6, works perfectly, and it will fully seat in there and let you torque that down. So just something to know there. Definitely use some thread locker on some of these steering components because they're constantly moving, and it's metal on metal, so it will definitely unthread over time if you don't. All right, so let's finally get to some wheels here. So I've been kind of around the block on these, changed directions. I definitely wanted to use some carbon fiber rings, and I had these really nice ones from Maz Designs. I just didn't realize these were 15 hole instead of the 16 hole for the Trio Type Bs. So it kind of threw me for a loop, so I got on Amazon and I ordered these Endura 15 hole that they fit, and I'm really digging them. You can see the ring lines up perfectly to the punch out in the wheel. Of course, you have to rotate the ring and find that alignment because it doesn't always align, but a really nice looking wheel overall without the ring. It's the first time I've used any Endura true beadlock style ring wheels, and by the way, they aren't fastened by the beadlock ring. It's an easy mount on the back. The beadlock ring is faux as far as wheel mounting, but I think these are going to look really good against that carbon fiber frame. So I've got some scale hardware from Maz Designs as well. I've got a lot of tires I've been looking at, and like I say, I've kind of switched directions and been juggling a lot of different wheel tire combos, so I'm not sure on tires. So I'm going to do a little work and come back with something mounted up. Okay, finally got some tires mounted up to this guy, and I think it is looking super sick. So the goal I had in mind for these tires was pretty much opposite of the goal I typically have. I was looking for the tallest, widest tire, trying to ram the tire into the shock collar to take advantage of these Hard Park rotating collars. So typically it is the opposite. I'm trying to avoid the shock and get good clearances there. But with these wide tires, I believe these are 24 and I believe they're 64 height. These Swamp Stompers, basically Baja Pro X knockoffs from Endura, but a really nice compound. And I think they look super aggressive, look really good on this thing. So a few notes as I was getting these guys installed. So you saw the initial weigh-in of the chassis without the wheels, and really good front bias. So I didn't want to throw that off at all in mounting these wheels. So if I put the same weights front and rear, it would. So I installed some vented brass Endura rings only on the front. And then I also added some black Endura hex weights. And those were actually rubbing the knuckle, so I had to slip a little nylon washer behind those at the bearing so they wouldn't sit in so far and hit the knuckle, and that was just perfect. And let me see if I can hold this up here. So plenty of wiggle, nice and loose. So that's something that you may encounter, just a little clearance issue. And then on the rear, I kept the aluminum rings, but I drilled those out to vent them like the brass. And then I've got Crawler Innovations full uncut foams all the way around, mediums and softs. So I think hopefully that is going to keep our weight bias pretty much exactly the same, maybe even a little bit better. It definitely appears that way, trying to lift it up. I mean, it's all front weight here. So anyways, I think the next thing we're going to do is throw this guy back on the scale and see where we ended up on the build. Moment of truth. Get these scales fired up, zero them out. We are ready. Look at that. Just teetering on 60-40. Nice 50-50. So let me get that battery in that front tray. And I'm guessing this will bring us to 60-40. So I get that crammed in here, where it's gonna live. And look at that. Doesn't get any better. Right on the nose. So that is perfect. All right, figured we'd do a quick little spin up here, a little bench test, and check out the overdrive. So we ought to have 33%, 4 turns in the front. 1, 2, 3. There we go, 4. So we got the correct gearing in there. And look how snug that battery fits in there. I think I need to turn up my BEC. I don't think I have it pumped to 8.4 yet. So it looks like that works. Drivetrain sounds fine. No binding. Everything looks good. Let's take a closer look at this battery fitment. So this is just perfect. This little Palm Power fits in there so nicely. And then you can see the cords tuck in there nicely. This whole zone over here on the passenger side is basically free. So that works out really well. So you can see the gearing, and then the motor has plenty of clearance over here because I've got the battery kind of shifted opposite. I'm sure that helps with the 50-50 side-to-side weight, but just works out perfectly right there. And I know Hard Park now is making their own tiny little battery that fits in their Dementor front trays. So a couple of good options there now, but man, looks super clean. Just wish that battery casing was black instead of blue. It'd be about perfect. But anyways, let's fire this guy up. Oh, speaking of firing this guy up, that's another thing that I really like about this layout. You can see the on-off switch right there, perfectly accessible. So super nice, easy access. And then ended up snaking the receiver antenna. You can see it coming out here. It follows the servo cable, snakes around, and then there's just a little bit of it right there under the tray, but nice and hidden. So just very happy with how clean the whole layout of this thing ended up being. Very impressed with Hard Park thus far. All right, had to do a little tabletop crawl in here just to test everything. Not that this will be too much of a test here, but look at that clearance. Skid goes right on over. Then we'll drop it off the back here. Nice. All right, back at it. Nice little tire squish. Get that skid over. Look at that, and those rear high clearance links, the drive shaft, everything just snakes right over it. This thing just has killer clearances, and it's just excellent. All right, let's come at an angle here, see if we can't get this roller bearing steering link caught on an edge. Right here. Look at that. It's doing what it's supposed to. We're just rolling on up. That is awesome. That is super cool. Let's see if we can't grab and get over this guy. Oh yeah, look at that. The belly right on over. Get that rear tire. Man, this thing is just super fun to drive. Super capable. Wow. Okay, one last approach here. Let's take this little steeper section. Get some nice squish. Oh yeah, right on up. So I'm happy with that. I think everything seems to be working well. I feel like I've got a little jumpiness and transition maybe I need to work through on the FURITEK app. But so other than that, I would say that this is a complete and successful tabletop test. Well, we made it to the end of another build, and I think this one came out fantastic. Just super cool, this SUV body style or roof style, I guess, and just can't get enough of this roller bearing steering link. You know, I've seen these, he's been out for a while. I initially thought, you know, whatever. But getting one in hand and seeing the quality and actually feeling how this works and getting a little bit of weight benefit up front on that axle. So a lot of goodness to those. So I'm really excited to have finally picked one of those up. And then of course, just everything else I think I've used before, minus these shocks. And again, really impressed with those. So hopefully these tires are going to do the job and really get into those and let me see these guys work in action. But very excited about this. The shift servo, of course, used that before. The Nano Bam, the transmission, of course, is the other crown jewel of this guy. So again, that'll be kind of fun to get out and really see spin and get to utilize a little bit. Get a little of that gear down from the transmission right off the gate. And just fantastic build overall. Again, just really impressed with Hard Park and the quality of their stuff. It just is always top notch. Have never had an issue with anything from them. So just really cool stuff. Let's see if it'll stand. Yep, really nice low weight bias. So just looks like this is going to be a really killer performer, and it's definitely a killer looker, that's for sure. Didn't think anything could look any better than the V-dub, but this DUV, man, it is right there with it. It is just sick looking. So super happy with it, and as always, I want to say thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. I definitely did on this one. Definitely had some new parts. Just a great build on this one again. So not sure what's next, but you know, there'll be something. Anyway, stay tuned, and until next time, thanks for watching.